The lemon cake sat cooling on my kitchen counter, golden and perfect, just the way Sarah loved it as a child. 62 years old, and I still remembered exactly how she'd sneak frosting from the bowl when she thought I wasn't looking. Today was her 40th birthday, and despite everything that had happened between us over the years, I wanted to make this moment special. I smoothed my hands over my apron, the same floral one I'd worn through decades of birthday cakes, scraped knees, and bedtime stories. My reflection in the kitchen window showed silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, laugh lines earned from years of being Sarah's biggest cheerleader, and hands that had worked 3 jobs to put her through college. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. Sarah stood on my porch with her husband Mark and their twins, 8-year-old Emma and Ethan. I'd expected smiles, maybe even a hug. Instead, Sarah's face was stone cold. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the living room I'd spent all morning tidying. "Of course, sweetheart. Let me just get the cake." "Sit down, Mom." Something in her tone made my stomach drop. I perched on the edge of my favorite armchair, the burgundy velvet one that had been my mother's. The children fidgeted behind their parents, sensing tension they couldn't name. Mark cleared his throat. "We've been talking, and we think it's time for some changes around here." "Changes?" I looked between them, confused. "What kind of changes?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "You're getting older, Mom. This house is too much for you. The yard, the maintenance, managing your finances." "I manage just fine," I said quietly. "I've been managing for 20 years, since your father died." "That's debatable." Mark pulled out his phone and started reading from what looked like notes. "You forgot to pay your electric bill last month. Your checkbook was off by $47. And yesterday, you called Sarah 3 times about the same grocery store question." My chest tightened. "I called once about whether she needed anything from the store when I was going. The other calls were about completely different things." "See? This is what we're talking about." Sarah leaned forward. "You're confused, defensive. It's time to face reality." "What reality?" "That you can't live independently anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow. Mark and I have found a wonderful assisted living community. It's only 30 minutes away, and they have activities, meals included. Assisted living? I stood up so fast the room spun. "I'm 62 years old, Sarah. I work part-time at the library. I drive. I volunteer at the animal shelter every Tuesday." "What are you talking about?" "You're in denial, Mom." Sarah's voice grew sharper. "And honestly, it's selfish. Mark and I both work full-time. We have the twin schedules, soccer, piano lessons. We can't be running over here every time you have a crisis." "What crisis? When have I ever asked you to?" "The smoke detector incident 2 weeks ago. You called us in a panic because it was beeping. The battery was low. I called to ask Mark if he had a 9-volt battery because I was out. You live 10 minutes away, and I thought." "Exactly." "You thought we'd drop everything to help with basic household maintenance." I felt the ground shifting beneath me. This conversation wasn't about my capabilities. It was about their convenience. Mark jumped in. "We've already put a deposit down. The room is lovely, faces the garden. You can move in next month." "Next month?" My voice came out as a whisper. "And we'll handle selling the house," Sarah continued. "The market's good right now. We can get a fair price, pay off your remaining mortgage, and put the rest in a managed account for your care costs." "Managed by whom?" "By us, obviously. We'll make sure your bills get paid, your medical needs are met. You won't have to worry about anything." The room felt like it was closing in on me. This is my house. I've lived here for 35 years. I raised you in this house. And now it's time to move on. Sarah's tone was final, like she was speaking to a child having a tantrum. "Mom, you can't live in the past forever. You need care now, whether you admit it or not." "I need care?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. When had her eyes become so cold? "Sarah, I walk 4 miles every morning. I've read every book that's come through the library in the past year. I balance my checkbook to the penny, and that $47 discrepancy was the bank's error, which they corrected. I haven't had a crisis in 20 years. So tell me exactly what kind of care I need. Mark and Sarah exchanged a look, the kind married couples share when they're dealing with a difficult situation. Mom, Sarah said slowly, like she was explaining something to a very small child, you called me last week asking about Dad's insurance policy. You seemed confused about whether the house was paid off. I wasn't confused. I was double-checking the details before meeting with my accountant about estate planning. That's what responsible adults do. Estate planning? Mark's eyebrows shot up. See, this is concerning. You're obsessing over morbid topics, making impulsive financial decisions. It's not impulsive to plan my future while I'm still healthy and clear-minded. But that's exactly what we're doing, Sarah said. We're planning your future. A safe, supervised environment where I'll have no privacy, no independence, and no control over my own life. Mom. Sarah's voice turned sharp again. You're being dramatic. This isn't about control. It's about safety. It's about what's best for everyone. Everyone.
Not me.
Everyone. I sat back down, my legs suddenly shaky. When did you decide this? We've been discussing it for months, Mark said. Ever since you mentioned feeling lonely sometimes. I mentioned missing your father during our anniversary. That's normal grief, not mental decline. But it shows you're struggling emotionally. Depression is common in elderly people. I'm not elderly. The words exploded out of me, surprising all of us. Emma and Ethan jumped, and Sarah immediately went into protective mother mode. You're scaring the children, she hissed. I looked at my grandchildren. These beautiful kids I'd babysat countless times, whom I taught to bake cookies and tie their shoes. They were looking at me like I was a stranger. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I didn't mean to raise my voice. Emma stepped forward tentatively. Grandma, are you going to live at the old people place? Out of the mouths of babes. Even an 8-year-old understood what this was. We'll see, sweetheart. I managed. Sarah stood up. We should go. This is clearly overwhelming for you, Mom. But the decision is made. We'll start packing up the house next weekend. Next weekend? We need to move quickly. The facility has a waiting list, and this room won't stay available long. As they headed toward the door, I found my voice again. Sarah, wait. She turned, and for a moment I saw a flicker of my little girl in her face, the one who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms. Happy birthday, I whispered. Her expression hardened again. Thanks for the cake, Mom. We'll take it with us. And just like that, they were gone, leaving me alone with the devastating clarity of what had just happened. My own daughter had decided I was too old, too inconvenient, too much trouble to live my own life. I walked to the kitchen and stared at the cake, my gift of love, now claimed as their property. Like everything else in my life, apparently. But as I stood there in the quiet of my own home, something shifted inside me. I was 62 years old. I had 20-plus years of life ahead of me, maybe 30. Was I really going to spend them in a supervised facility, having my mail opened and my medications managed by strangers, all because my daughter found my independence inconvenient? The answer crystallized with startling clarity. Absolutely not. The next morning, I called Margaret Hendricks, the estate attorney who'd handled my husband's affairs. When I explained the situation, her response was swift and decisive. Sarah has no legal right to force you into assisted living or sell your house, Margaret said firmly. You're competent, independent, and capable of making your own decisions. If you want to protect your assets, we need to act quickly. Within a week, I'd frozen my bank accounts and changed all the access codes. Margaret helped me update my will and healthcare directives, removing Sarah as my power of attorney and naming my sister Carol instead. When Sarah discovered she could no longer access my accounts, the phone calls started. How could you do this to us? She screamed into my voicemail. We're trying to help you, and you're acting like a paranoid old woman. Old woman. There it was again. Mark left equally angry messages about their wasted deposit and how I was being selfish and ungrateful. They called my neighbors, telling them I was having mental health issues and needed intervention. But Mrs. Patterson from next door surprised me. She knocked on my door one evening with a casserole and a knowing smile. "I've been watching this neighborhood for 40 years," she said. "I've seen plenty of families go through this. Some children forget that aging doesn't mean dying and independence doesn't mean incompetence." Her words were like balm on an open wound. "You think I'm doing the right thing? Honey, I think you're doing the brave thing. And brave things are usually right things." That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I rearranged my living room exactly the way I wanted it. I moved my reading chair to the window, where the morning light was best. I replaced the beige throw pillows Sarah had given me with the bright floral ones I'd been saving in the closet. I put my mother's china back in the display cabinet instead of hidden away in boxes. It was a small act of rebellion, but it felt revolutionary. The next day, I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center. I'd always loved to draw as a young woman, but life, marriage, motherhood, work had pushed art aside. Now, with careful brush strokes, I began painting again. Flowers, landscapes, portraits of my grandchildren from memory. Sarah and Mark's campaign continued for weeks. They told relatives I was having a breakdown. They spread stories about my declining mental state to anyone who would listen. Some believed them. My sister-in-law stopped calling. A few neighbors grew distant, but others rallied around me. Mrs. Patterson introduced me to her book club. The librarians at work praised my reliability and sharp memory. My watercolor teacher, Maria, encouraged me to display my paintings at the community center's monthly art show. 3 months after that devastating birthday conversation, my phone rang. Sarah's number. "Mom." Her voice was different, smaller, more desperate. "Hello, Sarah. I need to ask you something, and please don't hang up." I waited. Mark lost his job. We're behind on the mortgage, and the twins need dental work. I know things have been strained between us, but we're family. Would you be willing to help us financially? The old me would have said yes immediately, would have transferred money that afternoon, and asked what else I could do. But the old me had been willing to give up her home, her independence, her entire identity for her daughter's convenience. "No," I said quietly. "Mom, please. We're desperate. If we lose the house." "Sarah, 3 months ago you tried to sell my house and put me in assisted living because you decided I was too old and confused to manage my own finances. Now you're asking me to manage yours. That's different. This is an emergency. My fighting for my independence was treated like selfishness. But you're asking for my money is family loyalty? Mom, I'm sorry about before. Maybe we moved too fast." "You moved too fast? You tried to steal my life from me." The line went quiet for a long moment. "I love you," she said finally. "I was trying to protect you." "No, you were trying to control me. There's a difference." "So you won't help us?" I looked around my living room, my flowers blooming in the window box, my paintings hung on the walls, my books stacked on the coffee table. This life I'd fought to keep. "I'm saving myself, Sarah. For the first time in 40 years, I'm saving myself." After I hung up, I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. I felt sad but free. Like I'd finally learned the difference between love and surrender. 6 months later, my paintings were featured in the community center's spring art show. People I'd never met complimented my use of color, my ability to capture light. They saw me as an artist, not just somebody's mother or grandmother. Mrs. Patterson stood beside me at the opening, beaming with pride. "Look at you," she said, "finally letting the world see who you really are." I smiled, adjusting the small placard next to my favorite painting, a watercolor of daisies growing wild in an overgrown garden, reaching toward the sun. The title read simply, "Second Spring." At 62, I was finally learning to bloom.